Yes, my people, it's finally here, your favorite boxing show, the Jab Journal Show, where we talk all things boxing, no holds barred. So make sure you hit that subscribe button because you are not going to want to miss this. I'm telling you, this week's episode is as juicy as it gets. We're talking the Glory in the Giza card that just happened a few days ago in Egypt, headlined by Oleksandr Usyk and Rico Verhoeven. A card that I thought was spectacular, actually. Other than the main event, I think the way the scene was set, the pyramids in the background, the ring walks, the ring magazine, and Turki Al-Sheikh did a phenomenal job in my opinion. It's a shame that it was ruined in the end because, yeah, I think the card itself as well, you can't deny that it was a good card. Other than two of the fights, all of the fights were stoppages. The only fights that weren't stoppages was May Solomon and Mizuki Ruta and what's his name? Jack Catterall and Shakhram Giyasov. And that fight itself had a knockdown in the beginning. But yeah, it was a stacked card from start to finish. And it's just a shame how the main event ended. We're going to start by talking about the IBF Eliminator, the heavyweight fight between Frank Sanchez and Richard Torrez Jr. Um, Initially, when that fight was announced, I was like, yo, listen, I'm going for Richard Torrez Jr. simply because he's the young man, he's the fresher man. Um, he's been more active. We all know Frank Sanchez has had a history with terrible injuries. He's been inactive for a while now. And I thought, yes, it could be a close fight. At the end of the day, Frank Sanchez, on his best day, has the skills to cause an upset. But I just thought, nah, I think Richard Torres Jr. got this, man. And boy, was I wrong because in the second round, bam, nights out for Richard Torres Jr. And Frank Sanchez becomes Oleksandr Usyk's mandatory via the IBF. Do I think that fight happens though? That's a whole different story because I think that fight is what I would consider a high risk, low reward. Now, I'm not saying Frank Sanchez beats Oleksandr Usyk. No, that's not what I'm saying at all. But I'm just saying he's a very good fighter who on his day could be anyone. I mean, that's boxing for you. The risk and the reward just don't match up. You're not going to get paid enough to fight the likes of Frank Sanchez. And it's evident now that Oleksandr Usyk is taking these money fights. He's at the end of his career. He wants to make the most money that he can. That's why there was talks of him fighting Rico Verhoeven. I mean, that's why he fought Rico Verhoeven. There was talks of him fighting Oleksandr Usyk. There was even talks of him fighting Tyson Fury for the third time. A fight that I don't think any boxing fan wants to see, bar Tyson Fury himself, because the first two fights already happened. We've been there, done that. Basically, we don't want to see that no more. So yeah, like I said, it's interesting. IBF also released a statement, I believe. They released a statement saying that yes, we acknowledge that Ajit Kabayel is Usyk's mandatory, and that fight is happening next. All we're saying is 180 days after the Kabayel fight, Alexander Usyk has to fight our mandatory, which is now Frank Sanchez, and if he doesn't, he gets stripped. So it'll be interesting to see because will Alexander Usyk be stripped? If he is stripped, who does Frank Sanchez fight for that world title? Because he announced as well. He announced himself to the world in style, man. I don't think many people had him winning that fight. If you did have him winning that fight, congrats to you, man. Because yes, it was very possible. It was just very unlikely to me. Like I said, man, everything with him being inactive, him being injury prone, I just thought Richie was gonna get the job done. But yeah, that was the first fight. That was not the first fight. The first fight was May Solomon versus Mizuki Ruta, a WBR Ring Magazine World Title shot. That was also an interesting fight, man. I think Mizuki Ruta is on a level of her own. Going to the co-main event, not the co-main event. So what am I talking about? Jack Catterall versus Shakhram Giyasov. Now, initially, when that fight was announced, um, I said, listen, it's a hard fight. It's gonna be a hard fight for me because I think both fighters are phenomenal. Uh, but I had to side with the Brit. I picked Jack Catterall to win that fight because I just thought maybe he has a bit more to offer, and I was right. Jack Catterall was levels above Shakhram Giyasov. He showed it in that ring. I don't think there was a period or a second where Shakhram Giyasov posed a threat to Jack Catterall. I think Jack Catterall cruised through that fight. Those 1-2s were landing all night. One thing I didn't get from Shakhram Giyasov was the 1-2 that dropped him in the first round was the same punch that kept on landing. There was no adjustments made. And my only criticism of Jack Catterall was he could have stopped that fight if he wanted to. That fight could have been stopped in many occasions. He was that much better than Giyasov last night. Um, yeah, he took his foot off the gas. Now, was he playing it safe? It could be the case. But I just think when you have someone like Giyasov in front of you, someone who, by the way, Catterall basically knew everything that was coming. Every time Shakhram, it was just too slow. Anytime Shakhram Giyasov would throw something, he would barely throw. But when he would, Catterall could see it coming from a mile away. It was so easy for him, and I just wished he stepped on the gas a little bit more and got that stoppage, especially like um he did in his last fight against Esu, man. But yeah, I just think that could have been a better fight for Jack Catterall. Now I'm not criticizing him. At the end of the day, he got the job done. He got the job done unanimously. He beat him convincingly. I don't think anyone in the world could say or could have anything to say about that performance. He beat him in everything. He out jabbed him. He outworked him. He was a better man that night. But I just personally, as a boxing fan, would have loved to see a bit more, especially with what Giyasov was offering. Like I said, he wasn't offering much, and he was there for the taking a couple of times. But yeah, moving on. Next, what we had is what? What was the next fight? Um, the co-main event was next. Yes, Hamzah Sheeraz versus Alem Begic. And I've been seeing some criticism online about Hamzah Sheeraz. Or who is he fighting? Why is he fighting Alem Begic? You guys not know how the sport works. The only reason Hamzah Sheeraz is fighting Begic is because Diego Pacheco pulled out. He was supposed to be fighting Diego Pacheco. Yes, the American Diego Pacheco, who signed to Eddie Hearn. They pulled out of the purse bids. Canelo was supposed to be next. Canelo said, I'm not going to be ready until September. He had surgery. The next person in line, Jacob Bank, I don't know what happened with that one. But Alem Begic was a fourth option as he's ranked fourth by the WBO. At the end of the day, you can only beat what's in front of you. Sheeraz didn't have any choice. It was Begic or no one. The division is not going to stall itself because the fighters aren't already or the fighters don't want to fight Hamzah Sheeraz. At the end of the day, the division needs to keep moving, and the next best option was Alem Begic, a fighter who, on his best day, would not step a foot close to Hamzah Sheeraz. I think there's just levels for a reason. No disrespect to Begic. But yeah, Hamzah Sheeraz did what he was supposed to do. Was it 2 rounds? Absolutely battered the boy. And if he didn't, I would have looked at him weird because, as you guys know, I'm a big Hamzah Shiraz fan. But come on now, you're supposed to be getting rid of those kind of guys. You're not supposed to be playing with your food. Alem Begic shouldn't be in there with you. But at the end of the day, it's unfortunate that he isn't there with you. Get the job done. Keep it moving. Now, what's next for Hamzah Shiraz is the question on most people's minds. I'm actually, I actually know, have a feeling that Hamzah Shiraz is going for unification next. Now, who is it? I don't know. Could he wait until next May? Because we all know Canelo Alvarez is the fight that he wants. Canelo Alvarez is now fighting Christian Mbili on September 12th. Is that the fight that he's going to take? Because if he is, he has to wait. Because Canelo fights in September. Canelo only fights on Mexican holidays, which is Cinco de Mayo on Mexican Independence Day. And that's in May. Will Shiraz wait another year for a title shot? I don't think that's the case. I think what Shiraz should do is stay active. He's not fought. He's only fought once in the last year against ever since he beat Amber Williams, yeah, he's only fought once against Edgar Berlanga in New York last June 2025, July, sorry. So Hamzah Shiraz needs to stay active, in my opinion. Get in there with Mungia, yeah. Canelo stablemate, get in there with him on Canelo's undercard, beat Canelo's stablemate, unify the belts, and give Canelo no option but to fight you. Because yeah, that's a unification fight. Canelo wants these big fights. Shiraz is a big name. Shiraz is a massive name with 2 belts now. That's not a fight that Canelo can just say, okay, I'm gonna avoid it, because as it looks like Canelo wants to prove to the world that he still got it. That's why he's fighting the likes of Christian Mbili. So if he beats Christian Mbili, which I think he will, because I believe Christian Mbili is tailored for Canelo Alvarez, fight Shiraz if he beats Mungia. You see, that's now the setup. Because if Shiraz beats Mungia, he's beating your stablemate. He has one up on you. He has one up on Eddie Reynoso, who's your coach. He has 2 of the belts in the division, the WBO and the WBA. Easy chance to unify. Beat Shiraz if he can beat Shiraz, or Shiraz beats him, and then the winner of that fight unifies against Iglesias. That's what I want to see the super middleweight division. A division that many people believe is one of the best divisions in the sport at the moment. But yeah, last but not least, moving on to the main event, the topic or the discussion that you guys have been all waiting for. Oleksandr Usyk versus Rico Verhoeven. Now, there's been a lot of discussions about that fight. I've now calmed down, rethought what I've said initially, because initially my reaction was it's a robbery. Um, Oleksandr Usyk has just robbed Rico Verhoeven. Rico Verhoeven should be WB. He shouldn't be, but that fight shouldn't have been stopped. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying Rico Verhoeven would have won that. He was well ahead on my cards. I think my Coppinger had him up 8-1. I had it maybe 7-2 or 6-3. 8-1 is not crazy as well because there was some close rounds that I believe could have gone either way. All I know for sure is heading into that 10th round, the 11th round, sorry, the 12th round, sorry, Rico Verhoeven was up for me. So when the fight was stopped like that, my initial reaction was, no, come on now. You just robbed the boy. You just robbed him of a chance to be the heavyweight champion of the world. Come on, man. The occasion is too big to make silly mistakes, silly refereeing decisions like this. This shouldn't be happening at this level. The fact that we had 1 second left on the clock. Come on, referee. Just wait that 1 second, man. Now, there's going to be arguments saying, well, Usyk would have stopped him. Usyk would have done this. Usyk would have done that. How do you know? How do you know? Because none of us are fortune tellers. At the end of the day, Rico Verhoeven would have had 60 seconds to recover. He would have had 60 seconds to gain his legs. Would that have been enough? I don't know. You don't know. We don't know how he recovers. He could have been fine coming into that round, maybe grappled or just taken a round to move, given that round up because he believes he's ahead on the cards, and then we would have gone to the scorecards. Don't even get me started on the scorecards because the scorecards were leaked. Two of the judges had it 95-95. I think one had it 96-94. What were those judges watching? What were those judges watching? Because clearly we weren't watching the same fight. The fight that I was watching and the fight that you were watching was two different fights, bro. Because the common theme, I was speaking to everyone because I was on live as well. I was on Twitter. I was on um, speaking to my friends on the group chat. The common theme was Rico's running away with this. Oleksandr Usyk has to stop him. Even if he drops him, heading into the 11th, even if he drops him, I think there was such a big gap, in my opinion. Like a knockdown or two knockdowns would have still given Rico the fight. In my opinion, heading into that 12th round, heading into that 11th round, Oleksandr Usyk had to stop Rico Verhoeven. It's and it's a shame because let's say Rico Verhoeven survived that round and he survived to go to the scorecards, we would have he would have been robbed, in my opinion. Let's if he survived. 95-95 is absolutely shambolic. I don't know what the judge was watching. I've been to stadiums a couple of times. I've been to arenas, and sometimes when you're in the arena, you score cards, you score fights differently. What you're seeing at home and what you're seeing, it's a bit different. But then that's me talking from the bleachers because I can't afford those close seats. So that's why maybe it's different. But when you're front view, you're seeing everything live. Basically, there's no obstruction. There's nothing. You can't be making those mistakes, man. I believe the referee needs to be investigated. Number one. Number two, the judges need to be investigated. I think all boxing judges need to be investigated, to be honest, because the amount of shambolic calls we've been getting recently is out of this world. But more so last night, man, because unless you're a die-hard boxing fan that didn't want to be embarrassed by kickboxing, or you're a massive Oleksandr Usyk fight, no one is denying that that call was shambolic. No one in this world is denying that. We've just denied Rico Verhoeven of his Rocky moment. I'm a boxing fan. People argue with me, oh, boxing is a rigged sport, boxing is rigged. Um, you guys, blah, 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 blah. It's not a fun sport to watch because the fights are already rigged. We already know the winners. How many calls have been weird? And I always argue that you get terrible officiating in every sport. You get terrible officiating in football. I'm a massive football fan. You get terrible officiating in football. You get that in basketball. I know the basketball NBA fans aren't really happy with the NBA refs. You get that in every single sport, and that's always been my argument. But when you watch that last night, now I'm not saying it was coordinated. I'm not saying that it was a case of it being coordinated, but you could see why people would say it is coordinated because I think after 8 rounds, WBC scorecards were leaked and they had it a draw, 76-76 to be exact. Now, at that point in the fight, I don't think anyone in the world would argue that Usyk won maybe 2 rounds. Let 2 rounds out of 7 or 8, basically, go to Oleksandr Usyk. And they had it somehow a draw. In my opinion, I still believe it's a case of just bad officiating and terrible judging. But you could see, like I said, you could see why people would argue that the sport is rigged. We've just denied Rico Verhoeven of his Rocky moment. I'm never going to get over that. I'm never going to get over that. All for what? Terrible referee, man. That referee needs to be investigated. I don't ever want to see him in a boxing ring. Such a big occasion with everything on the line. The stakes are so high. You've seen the way Rico Verhoeven has performed so far, thus far. You've seen the magnitude of this fight. You do that? Come on now. Like I said in my post on the other platform, you know it's bad when the commentators are calling you out. Usually the commentators don't really pick a side. But it was terrible. The commentators were like, come on. You don't stop that there. You don't stop that fight. Let him go out on the shield. If he was going to get stopped. There was literally a second left. Credits to Peter Fury, man. That's what I have to go to. Credits to Peter Fury because in 6 months, he turned a kickboxer who's had one professional fight over the last 12 years into a person who is able to be the undisputed, two-time undisputed heavyweight champion of the world's toughest test. This is the Oleksandr Usyk has been in there with Tyson Fury. He's been in there with Anthony Joshua. He's been in there with Daniel Dubois. He's been in there with so many names. A kickboxer who's had one fight gave him his test. I don't care how the fight went. You can't deny that. Another thing you can't deny is the blueprint to beat Oleksandr Usyk has been set. What is that blueprint, you're asking? An awkward fighter who's got a gas tank to last 12 rounds, who jabs, who moves. It's a shame because if Rico Verhoeven would have won last night, he would have just been the WBC champ, by the way, guys, before any confusion. That was the only fight that was on the line. That's the only commission that sanctioned that fight. The IBF and the WBA would have just been vacated. Would have just been vacant, and they would have been up for grabs. But yeah, still doesn't change anything, man. He would have still been a world champion. He would have still been a world champion. Now people are gonna ask, does he get an immediate rematch? Unfortunately, he won't. The way the sport works, he won't get an immediate rematch because this is Oleksandr Usyk's voluntary defense, meaning his next fight has to be a mandatory. His mandatory is Ajit Kabayel. The only way his mandatory steps aside is if mandatory accepts a step aside fee. In what world do you guys see Ajit Kabayel taking step aside fee and letting the fight happen again? I don't see that happening. I don't think anyone sees that happening, to be honest. So unless Oleksandr Usyk wants to vacate the WBC belt, that rematch with Rico Verhoeven isn't happening next. It's still not out of the picture. If Oleksandr Usyk does beat Kabayel, a massive if, that rematch then is the next fight to make. But the thing is, if that's the case, then Oleksandr Usyk will be stripped off of his IBF title because the IBF, like I said earlier on in the video, the IBF has given him 180 days after the Caballero fight to make that fight, or else he gets stripped. So Oleksandr Usyk is in a is in a terrible situation where he's cornered, and the fights that if he wants to keep his belts, it's going to be very hard. He has to be five different people for him to keep his belts, because he fights Caballero, and then 180 days later he has to fight Frank Sanchez, which isn't the biggest fight. He won't get the most money. Then there's the rematch with Rico that the whole world is screaming for. Everyone and their grandmoms are screaming for that fight because we feel like the man had been done. He's been hard done. So it'll be very interesting to see how that heavyweight division moves next. I personally believe the IBF will be vacated. Frank Sanchez will fight someone else for that belt. I believe we'll see the Caballero fight next, and then after the Caballero fight is when we get the Rico Verhoeven fight. A fight that I think, the only way to save the sport from the embarrassment is for Oleksandr Usyk to go out there and absolutely spark out Rico Verhoeven. You've seen how he moves. You've been in there. You know how awkward he is. Work on that. Go in there, absolutely spark him out, and yeah, save the sport from the embarrassment that it's currently going through. Now, personally, I'm not one of those guys that cares. I just think the right man should have won. Is it embarrassing for the sport of boxing? Yes, it is. When you have your undisputed, um, two-time undisputed champion of the world, pound for pound number one, or some would argue number two, fighter in the world, losing to someone who's had one professional fight. But at the end of the day, I'm not gonna risk the sport's integrity just to prove, um, that boxing is a better, just to save us from the embarrassment, basically. I just think the right man, or the man who was ahead yesterday, was Rico Verhoeven, and had Usyk not stopped him in the 12th round, he would have been champion. And I don't care. I don't care about him being a kickboxer. At the end of the day, he put in the work. 6 months training camp. There was rumors of him fighting Anthony Joshua. It then turned out to be Oleksandr Usyk. He put in the work of a boxer. Credits to Peter Fury, like I said. Credits to Peter Fury, because in 6 months he turned a kickboxer into an elite boxer. But yeah, it's gonna be interesting, man. The next couple of months of the sport is gonna be very interesting. So stay tuned, man. Make sure you guys hit that follow so you guys can follow me as we navigate through these rocky months. And yeah, make sure you guys hit that subscribe.